listening to Clarity on Fire, a podcast for people who know what they don't want out of their life and career, but aren't sure what they'd rather be doing.
In a world where it's easy to exist, but hard to feel alive, we, Kristen
and Rachel,
two certified life and career coaches, are here to help you cut through the information overload, get unstuck, and focus not just on how you can have a career you're passionate about, but how to create a whole life that feels fulfilling.
So join us here, where we serve up inspiration and down-to-earth wisdom in a way that only two best friends can.
We want you to experience the relief of knowing that, yes, you're allowed to want more out of your life and career.
And no, you don't have to wander through the dark anymore. Our job is to light the fire that shows you the way. Let's go. Hello.
Hey.
Okay, last month we had a side chat, if you'll recall, where we got into 6 more ways to have a career you love, something like that. It was our side chat from January. So you can scroll back if you haven't heard that. It's really good. I highly recommend.
We got a lot of good feedback on that one.
Yeah. And that in and of itself was sort of a sequel to one we did in May of last year.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, one of those points we made in that episode was about emotional maturity, and that you cannot expect to have a life and a career you enjoy and are, let me just say it like this, capable of extracting enjoyment and fulfillment from. Because a job, a partner, as you all probably know by now, if you've heard us hammer away at this point, none of those things are delivery mechanisms for fulfillment and happiness and enjoyment. If you are not capable of feeling those things, no job, no partner is actually going to be able to fully inspire those in you. You have to be able to extract them. You have to be a good extractor.
Plus, it's not anybody else's responsibility to make you happy. So,
no.
While there are certain relationships and jobs that will be easier to extract happiness from, you still have to be an active participant in
Yes, absolutely. We are not here to say that any job you should be able to extract happiness from. I'm not here to gaslight you. Some are just toxic AF. However, one of the things that does get in the way of people genuinely being able to enjoy something good or hold on to something to be qualified, emotionally speaking, for something good is their lack of emotional maturity. And I said I wanted to come back and I wanted to do a whole episode focused entirely on emotional maturity. So
here we are.
Here we are. This is what we're doing. And I thought what would be really interesting is I found this post from a very popular psychologist, Dr. Nicole LaPera, on Instagram. Her handle is at the.holistic.psychologist. And she has so much great content. If you want to learn a lot about your inner world, I would highly recommend following her. She had this series of posts where she talked about, here are some signs that you were raised by emotionally immature parents versus signs you were raised by emotionally mature parents. I want you to, so we're going to talk about, we're actually just going to scroll through what she's saying and talk about it, share it with you and talk about it. And I want you to fixate a little bit less as we're talking. I mean, let's talk about the parents thing. We're going to go there because back to the point from the side chat last month, everybody has a childhood blueprint. And so the reason some people, and to a degree, all of us, are on a spectrum of emotional maturity to emotional immaturity, the reason that you might need some work on the emotional maturity front is because the people who raised you were not super emotionally mature themselves, and that became your blueprint. And so to go back and understand how your blueprint developed will help you break free and become more emotionally mature yourself.
It's no wonder most of us repeat what was modeled to us, but we don't have to keep repeating it. And that's why I do think that there's value in looking at your parenting, the parenting that you received, whether it was emotionally mature or emotionally immature, because you are probably now parenting yourself in the same way that you were parented.
Which is something you and I talk about all the time with each other, with our clients. is that some of the most important work you will ever do as a functioning adult is learning how to give yourself the parenting you did not receive in childhood. And that is emotional maturity right there. Like the work of developing emotional maturity is the work of learning how to reparent yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So this is directly relevant. Even though it feels like, why are we talking about our parents? I'm like, because everything gets back to that, basically. I mean, you want to move forward, sometimes you got to go back. So what I really like about this post, and she made this post on January 8th, the one about signs you were raised by emotionally immature parents. She talks about the adult impact of each of them. So she's not talking about what it looks like in childhood. She's talking about, as an adult, here's how you're going to know that this was your experience. Mm-hmm. So let's get into it, okay? The first thing that she says is, when things didn't go the way your parent wanted them to, they coped with childlike behavior, like lashing out, silent treatment, or blaming others.
Ooh, yeah.
Okay.
I think everybody can look at their parents and say they probably didn't always handle stressful situations super maturely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the adult impact of that is you might struggle with fear. You might struggle with or fear conflict.
Yeah.
You may
Hello to my people pleasers out there.
I know. You may not know how to take responsibility for your own behavior or become extremely emotionally activated when things don't go as planned.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, rigidity. Hello, inflexibility.
And what Brene Brown would call chandeliering, having a really intense reaction to something that's not as big of a deal as the way you're reacting to it.
Okay, so that's one. There's a number on this list. We're going to keep going. Okay. When you experience something hard or stressful, a parent always made the issue about them or how it made them feel or how it affected their own life.
Oh, man.
We're just going to sigh a lot during this episode. Okay.
I know many of you probably had at least one of those parents. Even if you didn't, I bet you saw friends who had that parent.
Yeah.
When you were at their house, when you were, hearing about their family stories. Oh yeah. We're all familiar with that parent who makes it about themselves.
Or even in adulthood, I see this all the time where an adult child will tell their parent, I really just don't like how that made me feel. I don't like that you said that. And, I guess I'm a terrible mom then, and you should never talk to me again. I'm like, I'm sorry, are you 13? Emotionally, yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the adult impact of having a parent who made everything about them and how it made them feel is that you might struggle with empathy, which is, the ability to put yourself in another person's perspective, according to her. You might center conversations around your experience or chronically give unsolicited advice.
Interesting.
I know, because I'm thinking of more examples of how this applies, because the way she's describing it is more, it's like you might struggle with thinking outside of your own perspective, and you might struggle with a little bit of like self-centeredness.
Essentially, you learned self-centeredness from your parent, and now you're doing that to yourself. I know people though
who did the exact opposite,
who were overly accommodating to everyone because they learned to be like that with that somewhat narcissistic parent.
Exactly. I think it can go one of two ways. Mm-hmm. You can become overly ruled by your ego like your parent was, or you can become overly ruled by your ego in an insecure way where like you don't even have a personality and you don't even express opinions because everything's always about this person. I'm not allowed to have an opinion or voice anything. You know what I'm saying?
That tends to be true in general when we think about parental modeling. Usually a kid's response is to either mimic what they saw or do the opposite for whatever reason, because they didn't like what they saw or because they tried to over accommodate. So I think I'll be curious if that continues to be true as we go through this list.
I just dropped my phone. So, okay, here we go. All right. Third thing, your parents confided in you about their relationship problems, sex life, or work issues when you were a child because they didn't understand that wasn't appropriate developmentally. Yeah, I definitely think there are some people who are like chronic oversharers with children who were not literally able to process what they were hearing and become almost like a parentified figure to their parent.
Or parents who treat their young kids like they're their friends instead of a child.
So The adult impact of that is that you might struggle with boundaries. You may overshare information or take on a caretaker or therapist role in your relationships.
Yeah. That kind of shows both sides of that. You could become the oversharer, or you could be the receptacle of other oversharers' information.
Okay. You feel very frustrated and like things are one-sided when you talk to them. Example, you share something important to you and they change the subject or talk about themselves. Yeah. Adult impact of that is you might find yourself in relationships with people who are emotionally unavailable or dismissive because you've never had relationships with people who were able to meet your emotional needs or hold space for your own experiences.
That makes sense.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Like, this is why insecure people become attached to avoidant people. Right there is because they are looking for someone to validate them and they never got that experience.
And yet they're going for what's familiar and comfortable, which is someone who was never able to validate them.
And keep in mind, the reason we are doing this is because we want you to see how this applies to your whole life, not just your relationship with your parents. You could be doing this with your boss.
Remember, we talked last month about the fact that your family relationships when you were young are probably playing out in your work relationships.
They become
or your friendships.
I mean, they become the blueprint for how you know how to interact with humans, period. Regardless of what container those humans are in. Work container, friend container, whatever.
Yeah, this is not just how you, as an adult, respond to this parent. This is how you respond to everything.
Any relationship. Okay. A parent regularly invalidates your feelings or experiences. Quote, well, some people are starving or this could be worse, or that didn't actually happen. So like, that's just straight up gaslighting. The adult impact of that, of being chronically invalidated, is because your reality has been consistently invalidated, you might struggle with trusting yourself.
That makes sense.
So much sense. And I see that all the time.
Or downplaying situations in your life. Like, I shouldn't be that upset about this. It's not such a big deal.
Right. Why is this such a big deal? I should just get over it. What's wrong with you? I'm like, is that you? Or is that you literally mimicking what your parent told you chronically when you were a kid?
It's heartbreaking when you think about it.
It's because they couldn't deal with your emotions. They did not have the emotional maturity or capacity to handle your emotions. So they have to minimize and dismiss in order to make them comfortable with it and able to handle it.
And now you're probably trying to do the same with yourself or with other people. You don't want to complain too much. You don't want to over dramatize things. And so you just act like it's fine. When it's not fine.
And you might do this to other people, not just yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that might make you uncomfortable because you don't want to think of yourself doing this to other people, but it's just true. If you didn't learn how to be comfortable with emotions, it's very unlikely you're going to be comfortable with other people's too.
Of course. Like, when would you have learned that?
Right.
You have to develop that on your own later in life.
I see that a lot in dynamics between couples. Like, I'll have a client who's really struggling because their spouse is just making them feel really invalidated. And it's not because the spouse doesn't care. I can very much sense it's because the spouse doesn't know how to handle emotions. And so they have to shut it down or dismiss them in order to feel safe. It's like it triggers them so much that they will have to shut down. And so that's their work to do. We can't do that work for them, but this happens a lot.
Yeah. This dynamic I've seen in a lot of clients and a lot of people.
Okay. Your parents have told you that you owe them or that you need to do things for them because they sacrificed to raise you. They regularly use guilt or shaming.
Ooh, yep. I have particularly heard this from people whose parents had a really big hardship that they overcame, and they had to work really, really hard.
My life was so much harder than yours. What do you have to complain about?
Yeah, maybe they came from more of a poverty situation and really worked themselves up to being more stable. Maybe
they were abused.
Or they were immigrants. And so they came to a new country and didn't know the language. And there was a whole lot of hurdles to overcome.
My dad was a chronic alcoholic who beat me. You have it good. Something like that.
Exactly. So they're comparing their kids' experience to their experience. And it turns into more invalidation.
And they might actually be doing better than their parents did for them. But they think because they're doing better, that means that they should be not held to any standard beyond that.
Yeah. And you owe me for everything I did to put you in this position.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So the adult impact of that is that you might become a chronic people pleaser. I would argue that anything in this post could lead you to become a chronic people pleaser. Or you might feel a lot of pressure to meet your parents' needs, which you've been doing since childhood.
Mm-hmm. These are my clients who I've had many over the years who their parents would pay for college if they studied certain things.
Right.
Or else, you owe us a good college education if we're going to pay for it.
Again, this will also show up in every context, not just with your parents. This will show up at work where you feel like I've got to sacrifice and they're paying me, so I owe them my complete allegiance and I have to respond at 9 p.m. at night because they're paying me. I owe them.
Yeah.
Like no boundaries,
dangerous.
Having no boundaries because you think owing someone because it feels like someone's paying you, that means you're indebted to them.
Or being over responsible for the work that's well beyond your domain.
Yep.
Oh yeah. Seen it.
Over and over and over again. Okay. The last one in this post is your parents expect you to be their full focus and can feel jealous of your partner or friends, similar to a small child.
Especially for you only children out there.
Yes.
That might be amplified, which would make sense.
The adult impact of that is that you might feel overwhelmed or like you are your own parent's parent. You may feel guilty for spending time with other people outside the family or nervous about introducing them to people you care about.
Yeah, it could lead to some, if not antisocial behavior, then some social anxiety because you don't want to detach too much from them because they need you. They rely on you.
Okay. Yes. This, honestly, she could have gone on. She really could have like doubled this and probably came up with so many more.
Write a book on these.
Oh, maybe she has. I don't know.
Probably.
But yeah, there's an exhaustive list, I think, of signs that someone is emotionally immature. But these are some really good concrete examples of what it might have looked like in your experience and why you might now be struggling to do things like have boundaries, not please people, not over accommodate, not
be uncomfortable with people's emotions.
Yes. Yeah.
Not know how to hold space for yourself or others, not trust yourself.
Right. Why you might struggle with trying to make everything, to simplify things in terms of like black or white, make like, well, this is right and this is wrong. Again, if you're raised by emotionally immature people who don't think in nuance, they only think in like shades of black and white, then you're going to have a hard time thinking in nuance too. Or now, if they're really reactive, you're going to be really reactive.
Yeah. I would be curious for anyone who this is resonating with, if you have certain habits, behaviors that you are self-aware enough to know that's probably not the healthiest thing, you can work backward too and say, why am I kind of a people pleaser? Or why do I get so nervous when my boss brings up certain things? Instead of starting with the parent dynamic and then the way we just did, we kind of said, if this is what your parent dynamic look like, this is what it looks like as an adult. You can flip it and say, if this is how I am as an adult, where did that come from? What was the dynamic that probably created that in me, that anxiety or that self-centeredness or that lack of trust? And that might help give you a little bit of context, first of all, and let yourself off the hook a little bit because you can't help the default reactions that you develop as a child. You're in survival mode. You're trying to just get by in your circumstances. So the way you are today is perfectly understandable. And now you are an adult. Now you can take responsibility and you can choose a different response and you can work on healing where that came from.
Which is why we go to therapy, why we go to coaching. I mean, it's just hard to do on your own. But okay, do you want to hear the signs you were raised by emotionally mature parents? This will feel like a fantasy to most of us, but I think it will clue us into how we could approach ourselves and how we could talk to ourselves and what we could offer ourselves now.
That's how I want to listen to this, actually, as I want to think about this with self-parenting.
Yes.
And use this as a model for that. A new model, a healthier model.
Yes. Okay. When your parents lost it or hurt you in some way, they apologized to you. Parents apologizing is, in my experience with all of the people I've worked with, a unicorn. I've rarely heard it done. And I love the idea of a parent regularly saying they apologize to their child. Because it's amazing to me to think that they think if I apologize to them, that'll make it seem like I'm wrong and that they'll lose respect for me. And it's the exact opposite. When I model that it's okay to mess up and it's okay to make amends, then I raise a child who knows that it's okay to do those things. And that's the kind of child you want.
Yeah. And what if you practiced apologizing and forgiving yourself?
That's exactly what we're talking about. Everything we want you to think about is how to treat yourself.
Yeah, if you didn't get that, you can give it to yourself now.
Yeah.
There's going to be moments when you have an outburst or you don't follow through on what you said you were going to do, or in some way let yourself down or act impulsively. And you can say, self, you know what? I'm sorry. I probably shouldn't have handled that way. But hopefully you understand, and I'm going to try to be better next time. And then you can forgive yourself. Yeah, I get it. That makes sense. Okay, we'll try better next time. Great. Move on. Emotional maturity.
The adult impact of having parents who apologize to you is that you will acknowledge how you impact those around you, and you'll be able to take accountability for your actions.
And apologize to other people. If you didn't get
that's what she's saying.
Yeah.
Like,
I was thinking about to yourself.
But
that's a vulnerable thing to apologize to someone when you know you screwed up.
Yeah.
And especially if you didn't get any apologies, you might not really know how to do it.
How many world leaders don't know how to do this?
Oh, that's a scary thought.
But it's so true, is that they are so afraid to acknowledge any wrong that they made or any wrongdoing that they will chronically avoid taking any accountability for their negative impact. And it's so toxic.
A lot of good models as a society.
No, we really don't.
Of apologizing, taking responsibility, recognizing you screwed up because you're human, and saying, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that just like really sucked. And I'm not even going to make excuses for it. We don't have a lot of that.
Yeah.
So, okay, thing number 2. I love this list. When things didn't go as planned or the way a parent wanted them to go, they focused on solutions and accepted outcomes without outbursts or completely shutting down. So they were emotionally regulated. Like they could roll with the punches when things went sideways, is what she's saying, right?
And they looked for, what do we do? Instead of just having a giant emotional reaction or a big tantrum or blaming other people. Okay, let's look for some solutions. How do we handle this?
So the adult impact of that is that you trust yourself to cope with things, even if they didn't go as planned. So much of this comes up in coaching to the point where it's like they're so afraid to fail or try anything because they haven't been allowed to mess up because their parents probably would have had a strong reaction to them failing or messing up. And they didn't get a lot of opportunities to just like be bad at stuff and to experiment because they had to be like good and perfect all the time. And so then they're chronically unable to like trust themselves to do anything.
Oh, self-trust is such a big part of coaching, developing that, because most of us did not develop that in a healthy way growing up.
Yeah. So when things don't go as planned in your life, can you respond like a good parent would by just, okay, all right, so you messed up. Okay, that's all right. Let's see what we can do better next time. What are we going to learn from that?
Or how are we going to handle this? Life throws a curveball.
Okay. We'll roll with it.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, you see how it's not super crazy reactive. It's not like totally shutting down. It's not running away. It's not withdrawing. It's not avoiding. It's just, okay, let's figure this out. And it doesn't mean there's no room.
That you will figure it out.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have the solution today, trust that I will figure it out.
And it doesn't mean that there's no room for emotions. She's saying, like, without outbursts or completely shutting down.
Right. So disappointment, a little frustration, a little bit of stress would be normal, but that's not an outburst.
Or is it shutting down?
Yeah.
Okay. Thing number 3. Your parents understood and respected you as your own unique individual rather than molding or pressuring you to fulfill their own needs of who they wanted you to become.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Yeah. So in adulthood, that means you have a healthy dependence in relationships, feel comfortable expressing your emotions, and you're able to meet your own needs.
Because you were allowed to be you. You didn't have to be a mini version of them.
Yeah. Your life was not about pleasing them. Your life was not about fulfilling their unfulfilled desires. So In self-parenting, I feel like the way that this shows up is where are you putting pressure on yourself to be like other people when you're just not?
Mm-hmm.
And like, where are you expecting yourself to mold and conform to societal norms that maybe just aren't you?
This could happen in external relationships too. You could want other people to be a certain thing or a certain way.
Yeah.
And then when they let you down, it's
devastating.
Instead of just letting them be themselves and recognizing that's who they are. and I accept them.
Maybe who they are is not that into me. And I just need to let them go. Right? Like, instead of trying to mold them into the perfect boyfriend that they clearly aren't because they haven't healed their own avoidant attachment trauma.
Yeah.
I could just let them go and stop trying to force it.
Yeah. So being an emotionally mature adult means not trying to mold yourself into anything that society wants you to be or any person wants you to be, and not trying to mold other people. Just let people be themselves and let you be you.
Yeah. And have the courage to let people who aren't going to align with you because they're actually just not moldable and we don't want to try to mold them, let them fall away. Okay. Next thing. Your parents trusted you to find your own way, encouraged your independence, and allowed you to make mistakes.
I got to say, I got to give my parents mad props for that one. They were very good about just like, I would make decisions. They didn't always get it or agree.
Yeah.
They let me make my own mistakes. And I always felt very independent. That's not something a lot of parents will do. They kind of do the overprotective thing.
Yeah, I think back to like so many times my mom could have interfered and she just didn't. And I'm almost like, maybe you should have interfered on some of these things. Like, she would just like let me, like, remember how you went to a governor's school in high school? I had the option of going to governor's school and my parents could have totally pressured me into going. And I didn't want to like leave my friends. And they were like, okay. Like, they could have forced me to go to this like academically rigorous school because I was qualified to get into it. And that could have sent me to Harvard or something. And they were like, whatever, she doesn't want to go. They didn't make me go.
But you know what? My parents did not pressure me at all. I pressured myself.
Right.
I was the one who was like, I need to do this. They would have been fine wherever I went to high school. And then I didn't love it. I was miserable.
But you were blaming them for it.
I was not.
That was
so
on
all
you.
I'm saying is maybe your mom shouldn't have pressured you into it because you might have hated it.
I would have hated it. I really think I would have hated it.
But yeah, no, that is a very emotionally mature response, is when you let people make their own decisions without having to insert yourself. And a lot of parents have trouble with that, with not inserting themselves into their kids' decisions.
Right. Trying to rescue them from making a mistake or failing because they're either afraid of the emotional fallout because they don't feel capable of handling your failure, or they're afraid of how it's going to reflect on them. Or
they're afraid you're going to make a mistake that's so devastating that you'll never recover from it.
Which is so silly.
That means they don't really trust you.
Or themselves. Or the universe.
And so when you give yourself permission to try something and make a mistake and learn from it, you have so much less fear. You're not being fueled by anxiety and worry and fear all the time. You're like, all right, I'll give it a shot. If it doesn't work out, I bet I'll learn something. Then I'll move on.
So she says the adult impact is you don't fear criticism or become paralyzed at the thought of making mistakes. You're also resilient and learn from your experiences. Boom. I mean, that is everything.
And you'll let other people make their own mistakes.
Totally.
And not have to try to overly control.
Or become paralyzed at the thought of other people messing up around you.
Yep.
Okay. I could go on and on about each of these.
You can see this at work so much.
Oh my God. Yeah. Micromanaging other people.
Totally. That's what micromanaging is.
Yeah.
I don't really trust you. I feel like I need to insert myself.
Okay. When there was a conflict or fights within the home, communication didn't include name calling or shaming.
Yeah.
Basically doesn't devolve into slinging shit at each other like monkeys.
And making it personal.
Yeah.
You can have arguments and you can have disagreements
without attacking someone's character.
Calling them names. Yeah. Making them feel ashamed.
So the adult impact of that is that you're able to regulate your emotions and repair after conflict in your relationships and can be respectful even during disagreement. And I would add that like conflict isn't going to scare you that much if you've seen it done in a way that's respectful and not super unregulated and like super heated. It's just, there might be frustration, there might be anger, but it's not like explosive. It's not like vengeful or anything like that.
I would also pay attention to the language you use in
with
your
yourself.
own mind. Are you calling yourself names? Are you saying really cruel, biting things to yourself?
Yeah. Are you shaming yourself when something goes wrong?
Maybe because you were called names. And so you think that's really what I deserve.
Okay. When you experience something hard or stressful, your parent was able to listen to you and she wrote emphasize instead of empathize. So, and empathize with you, with how you felt without making the issue about them. So as an adult, you're able to understand and share an emotional experience of another person without invalidating them. Or yourself. Or yourself. Like, could you just listen to yourself and have empathy without trying to immediately jump to a solution or immediately jump to trying to lessen your feelings because you're afraid of them? Like, could it be just okay to feel how you feel for a minute?
Yeah. Imagine if you practiced those self-parenting tactics, how much smoother adulthood would feel for all of us. Just less tumultuous, less emotionally reactive, less scary. Like everything is going to set something off. That is something that I think, I don't know a person who has had that family experience. The second list.
All of these things? No, absolutely not.
Hopefully you had at least one or two of them.
Yeah.
But maybe not any. And I don't know an adult who reacts like that.
I don't know a lot of them.
Life in general. So hopefully something there was resonant. And
there's still 2 more on this list.
There is?
Oh. I love how you're wrapping this up. I didn't say it was done.
I don't know. I thought your tone was wrapping up. No, okay, let's hear them.
I've got 2 more.
Let's hear them.
They understood their role was to meet to the best of their ability your emotional needs and didn't look for you to be their sense of support or to be a peer to them. So the adult impact is you were able to develop a sense of self, learn who you truly were, and fully emotionally mature.
Yeah, I've definitely seen parents who tried to do the like we're peers thing.
Well, yeah, it's codependent.
Yeah.
And
then often those parent-child relationships will turn into like, I text my mom 6 times a day. And, it just, there's
seen that.
Fewer boundaries. Like, obviously you want healthy relationship, but you don't want to be overly attached either. So there's like a fine line.
Okay. And the last one is your parents had boundaries around what they spoke to you about, understanding that you had developmental limits as a child. So as an adult, you have boundaries around what you share with other people and establish trust through emotional intimacy rather than oversharing.
Instead of, you will be less likely to overshare. And you might put up boundaries when somebody else is starting to overshare because
that doesn't seem attractive to you. It seems off-putting if you're emotionally healthy.
Versus if your parent was constantly talking about things that were totally inappropriate, then you're probably going to be like, oh yeah, anything's fine. And welcome more inappropriateness.
One of my friends is in a training right now, and she met someone who she's going to be partnered with for a while, on a project. And the person was immediately like, oh my God, so we're going to be best friends. And she was like, I would have historically reacted to that in such a oh my God, yes, fine, we're going to be best friends. And I was off put. I was like, that's good. Because the someone grasping at you for an intimacy that isn't earned is now a red flag. That's great.
That is a sign of increased emotional maturity right there.
Yes. And I would say that look for examples of where, if you feel somewhat insecure, especially if you have an insecure attachment, anxious attachment style, where you might be reaching for intimacy. And it doesn't have to just be oversharing. It could be physical too. It could be emotional, where you're trying to create intimacy too soon in a dynamic in order to keep them around because you might fear abandonment potentially.
Yeah. Oh man, there is so much attachment stuff going on here. That might be a good follow-on episode if you really resonated with this, with all of these examples. Maybe go listen to our episode about
Attachment styles. I'll have to link to that. That was a while ago.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
I don't even know when it was at this point. It's been almost 5 years. I can't remember timelines for most of them at this point. I've reached my saturation limit.
You did for a long time.
Yeah.
Impressively long time, but yeah.
Okay, so now our lists are done. So again, I really think you should follow at the.holistic.psychologist, Nicola Pera on Instagram, because that's where we read these lists from, and she's got really great content. And I'm learning just from things I feel like I knew a lot of these things, but the way that she's breaking it down and just putting it into simple terms is really digestible. And I appreciate that. And I'm always game for us learning better ways to parent ourselves and talk to ourselves and treat ourselves. And I just want you guys to understand, like, this is the work. Like, all of the time that people, like, I know like 90% of what people think they want is, I just want to change my career because I'm unhappy in this and I want to get a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whatever. And great, that's fine. You can want that. This is the work you need to be doing in order to become qualified for the really good things in life, like the good jobs that aren't toxic, the people who will respect the shit out of you and will be a really great friend and partner to you if you speak to yourself really kindly, if you aren't shaming yourself, if you aren't super emotionally reactive, if you can roll with the punches, if you're not afraid of failure and making mistakes, life gets so much better and easier.
Versus if you are emotionally impulsive, you don't trust yourself, you're terrified of making a mistake, and
one little thing will send you to bed for a day,
and you're constantly worrying and fretting about things. How do you expect to be able to find a career or relationship that's going to be a really good fit for you? You wouldn't trust yourself to choose it anyway. You wouldn't trust yourself to give it a try, because what if it doesn't work out?
Right.
So many of these aspects that we're talking about might seem unrelated to your actual goal, which might be, I want a job that I care about. I want to feel less drained. I want a really healthy relationship. Great. Well, first you have to be able to trust yourself and try things without constantly worrying about failing, and ride the emotions of trying things and them not always working, or exploring, or having disappointments and excitements. All of this is a critical foundation, and frankly, the direct path to the outcome that you want.
Yeah, become the kind of person you want to be so that you can get the things you want. That's kind of it's not our overt tagline, it's our covert tagline. And this is kind of the bedrock of that, everything we just talked about.
I think people imagine that if they could just transplant themselves into the perfect job or the perfect relationship or the perfect whatever,
they blow it in like a day or less.
Right.
And we don't want to hear that, because we just hate the idea of it taking time and work in order to get good things. But I just don't know anything worth having that doesn't require some sweat and some rejuvenation. That's not the word I'm trying to. Some
a little bit of acclimation.
Well, kind of like just remaking yourself. Like building yourself down and then building yourself back up. Like it requires a renovation. I think that's what I was trying to say, of yourself and your personhood. And people don't like to hear that, but it's just true. So I'm not going to not say it just because you don't like it.
There's a reason why, I don't know the exact stat on this, but why so many lottery winners lose it all in a matter of years.
Most of them. Within a year or 3 or something like that. I think it's within 3 years, like the vast majority of lottery winners are broke again, or at least in the same position they were when they started.
Yep.
We have a set point. And you really have to work to change your set point, but it's totally possible.
Yes. And there's value in acclimating yourself to healthier and healthier dynamics little by little, so that, again, you don't self-sabotage because you jumped into something. If you're a chronically anxious person who gets transplanted into a really great work dynamic, you're probably going to overthink everything and be concerned that people are talking about you behind your back and they don't really like me or appreciate me. And you can self-sabotage an entirely great situation.
Totally.
Because you hadn't worked on that core issue in the first place.
Or you just make something harder than it needs to be. Maybe you don't sabotage it, but maybe there's like a really great person who's super secure and emotionally healthy and they want to have a relationship with you, but you keep like pushing them away because of your own emotional immaturity or attachment trauma that needs work. Like, don't make life harder than you need it to be. Heal.
Yes.
Okay. So
let us know which of these most stood out to you.
Or all of them. I don't know. Maybe it was literally all. I hope not. But I know some of you are like, yep. Oh my God. Yep.
And if there's any from that second list that you really want to try to develop within yourself, I would be curious to know that too. Do you want to practice apologizing more? Do you want to practice focusing on solutions instead of emotional reactivity? Do you want to practice just sitting with emotion for a little while without judgment of your own and other people? Which of those would be most impactful for you to try to develop in yourself? Let us know.
Okay. And we haven't talked about this in so long. So if you're new to the podcast, we would love it forever if you left us a rating and a review.
Oh, please. We love it so much. We do.
We do. And it does help. It helps other people find us, which I know you want.
We always will text about it and be like, this was so nice. So let us have a little Rachel text love.
And I'll read it on the podcast usually too.
Yeah.
So if you want to hear your words written, drop a 5-star. I'm not reading it if it's not 5 stars, just so you know.
That's fair. That's fair.
I mean, that's totally fair. Quid pro quo. If you leave me a 5-star review, I very well may read it on the podcast and then actually write a review. I mean, if you just leave 5 stars, that's fine. I also like a review. Okay.
Both and.
Yes. And whatever. I don't know. I know you can't leave reviews in Spotify, which I think is dumb, but
It's dumb.
I mean, on Apple Podcasts, you definitely can. So, okay. Leave me a rating. Leave us a rating and a review, not just me. Unless it's 5 stars, in which case I'll take it.
I will take any version of 5 stars you want.
I don't care. Okay. So we will be back next Friday, and I don't know what we'll be back with. I think it's an expert interview.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's going to be a good one.
Okay, so I'm not going to tell you what it is because I'm just going to surprise you with it, but I think it will be relevant to everyone, even if on the surface you're like, I don't think this applies to me. I'm just going to forewarn you, listen anyway. I think it's going to help you.
Okay. Yeah, this is going to be a good one.
Okay, we will see you next Friday.
See you then.